All right, good morning. Hello, welcome. Whether you're watching us in the morning, the afternoon, it could be midnight, 1 in the morning. Doesn't matter, you're joining us, and guess what? It is another episode of Chopping It Up with Cador. Of course, I'm Perry White, and the man, the myth, the legend himself right there, Roger Cador. Wave for the people, coach. Wave at him.
Oh. Hello, Perry PJ.
I'm all of those things. We want to welcome everybody back. It is another great week of this show, and guess what? We celebrated MLK Day yesterday, so to pay our respects to the legacy and the life of Martin Luther King Jr., we took the day off, but we're here today on Tuesday. As we get the show started, I gotta ask you and talk to you in terms of the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King and what he meant for not only just America, but particularly the African-American community, because you grew up in a generation of which you knew about segregation, in which you knew there was black and there was white. But to be able to have his legacy and who he was as a person, and ultimately, as we've gone on, your success in life has come at being able to be in both lanes, both black and white world.
Well, when I was growing up, I lived segregation. Everything was segregated back then. And to a large extent, people were forced to accept it. Obviously, we felt powerless as being black people because there wasn't any court in America was going to do you justice if it was against a person of another race, like a white. So you really were handicapped to a large extent, but we never stopped dreaming, and I know I never did, and I did my share to try and bring people into reality, try to do what's right by black people. So yeah, we think in terms of just America, but worldwide, where people heard of Dr. King, he made a difference. He gave people pride, because when you left United States, it was other people of ethnic groups being discriminated against, and they saw that and they felt empowered by what he was accomplishing here in the United States.
Yeah, they did. And, talk to me in terms of, because you were around when Dr. King was alive. What was that like to firsthand be able to experience that impact of his inspiration, but let alone his fight for equality and justice for all in America, not only for a certain sector of the American citizens, but for all citizens, particularly the mistreatment of African Americans, as you said, from the criminal justice side to just the basic life in terms of where you drink your water from, a water fountain that says colored and as well as for whites. What was that like to grow up to even be a part to know and hear each and every week or each day or during that time that Dr. King was out doing that?
Boy, Dr. King, as it relates to me, he gave me power. He really gave me a sense of belonging and the will to know that, and courage and desire that I could make it, that I was going to be okay. And this is why I went out. I wasn't afraid. And I don't know if I can explain this, Perry, when I said not being afraid, because back then you could be shot and killed or killed for little or nothing, and no court was going to convict anyone. You got me? But when we were doing the picketing, that's what we call it back then, I was 15, 16 years old, and I wasn't afraid. And we had the party lines telephone, and the people, because that was the one place where it was integrated. The party lines were integrated. And there were white people saying to my mother, "We gonna get him. We see him. We gonna get him." And, my poor mother would cry and feel, and I never was concerned about my life at that point because I had no life. That's the way I felt.
What was life like? Because I think a lot of times these days, especially, and this may be a walk down memory lane for you, but for me, it been a generation. I was born in the late 80s, and so life for me growing up was a little bit different on the back end. But when you were growing up and understanding things were segregated, what was that like in terms of life, to know that this is black and this is white, and that there was a line and a boundary drawn that it had to be followed by society?
It was darkness and lightness. That's really the best way to describe it. We lived in darkness, they lived in lightness. And that's how bad things were. They were a lot worse than we led to believe, you understand? Because we accepted stuff. So it was a lot worse than that and you start taking away people's dignity. It's not a whole lot left to live for.
Because I asked that because a lot of people saw it from, especially me growing up, from the television scenes of where I saw like Selma. I've been to Selma, Alabama myself personally, and walked the Edmund Pettus Bridge and just pictured what these things were like, because the scene that I saw of letting the dogs out and attacking people, spraying people with the water hose. But that was just a segment that people saw for the television camera. But the everyday life of somebody who lived in, let's just say, small town Louisiana, in which they didn't get the national coverage, in which nobody outside of that small town probably gave a damn in terms of the African-American people that lived there. What was that like to actually live that, and not for the cameras, but the everyday lifestyle?
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much try to describe it the way I saw it. Like I said, it was darkness we were walking in, and there wasn't a lot of light. And there wasn't a lot of hope for the people. Just think, generation after generation after generation of young African Americans grew up into what the last generation had. You got me? And I was explaining to my son that it wasn't until the 60s. Just think about that. The 60s, when we started seeing prospering a little. Mm-hmm. You could now leave the farm area from being a sharecropper where you didn't make one penny. Now your construction jobs were opening up, where now the African-American men could go and make some money. And I could see how proud they were, because on Friday, if you listen to them talk, say the eagle is flying today. Now, the symbol of the eagle is a symbol on the dollar. Mm-hmm. There's an eagle on the back. Mm-hmm. And today, Friday, the eagle flew. That eagle never flew before. And my daddy was a happier man, even though he was a really good farmer, but he was never going to make one penny. But when he became a construction worker, he was able to bring money home on Fridays. So that made him a lot happier. He made money for the first time in his life. So that's what it was. And it's around 63, 64 when my father first started making money. So there it is.
Yeah, because I know my family is all originally from a small town in Arkansas, Lake Village, Arkansas.
I know where Lake Village is.
Right there across the river from Greenville, Mississippi. And when my grandmother and all her brothers and sisters all graduated high school, they left the South because they saw how hard my great-grandfather worked. He worked in the fields in terms of, he was one of the only guys that knew how to do the irrigation systems.
Yes.
And that, at the time, I think that was a huge job because it took a lot of mathematics into that. Yes. In terms of how you had to do the irrigation and the flow and the volume of water. And so I think they realized growing up that that was not the lifestyle in a small town that you saw predominantly ran and pretty much taken over by a white community, in which there wasn't much hope if you was black. And I know my grandmother talking to her said, I'd be damned if I go work in the field. So her and all her brothers and sisters moved up north. When you talked about those jobs, Chicago is where my grandmother set up base. A couple of her brothers and sisters all went to Chicago too. Cleveland, St. Louis, Kansas City, Las Vegas, they left the rural South and went to places where it was more progressive. But of course, the North, it was always seemed that the North had better opportunities for African Americans. And even when you talk about in education, there was a lot of times you could go to an HBCU in the South, but if you wanted to get post-grad education in terms of your master's, you had to go to like a Michigan or a Kansas State.
Or Iowa.
You had to go up there to get post-grad education. And so I know firsthand for that they moved there for a better quality of life. And at that time, you know, you can go work in a factory or you could go and, like my grandmother did, got in programs where back then to be a nurse, you went and took courses and you got certified. It's not all the deep schooling that we have of the world today, but to be able to have those opportunities, they felt like leaving the South and leaving those rural areas where it was hard to have a place because Mr. So-and-so parents and folks own this land and they ran the town, and you would never be able to make it in the town as long as they were in power. Was it something similar like that where you were from?
Yeah. Wasn't so fortunate. My brother only went to the 4th grade, and he's only 2 years older than I. And when I was viewed as a lot different by those the white people, and they knew that I went and finished high school, went to college, and they said to my brother, "You were the smart one. Your brother was the dumb A." I know I could say ass on here. Huh?
Yeah.
Said I was the dumb ass, and that's the kind of mentality. Because they couldn't keep me back, they knew I was different. They knew I would be something of a problem. So I remember 4 or 5 years ago, I was at Whole Foods, and I was going to the restroom, but I was on the phone talking. And there was a gentleman in there with his son, and he heard that accent. And he waited till we get everything, we went out. He said, "You're Coach Cador, aren't you?" I said, "Could be." And he smiled. You know, he introduced himself. He said, "I'm the great-great-grandson of Eli Jarrow." I said, "That is interesting. The man that took all our money, made us work for nothing." He said, "Yeah, your book." He said, "In your book, you talked about him. My people are really disappointed and angry with you." I said, "About me telling the truth? They're angry? They're angry with me about telling the truth?" And he looked at me and said, "You got to understand, because who my grandfather was, nobody want to believe anything bad about him. They want to believe." I said, "That's their problem." I said, "I told the truth." But I said, "If you read my book, didn't I say something nice about your aunt, who was a part of that family? Didn't I say something nice about her, how kind she was to me?" So I said, "You've got to understand, when people are telling the truth, you have to look at it from both sides." And he said, "You know, I hadn't looked at it that way. You did say some kind thing about her." And I said, "You got to understand, when you're telling a story, one that I had to tell, you had to tell the truth. Because there are people like you who may come back and question the validity of your information." And I didn't want that to happen. So, but that's the kind of stuff they wanted to keep people down and stack them on top of each other for more generations. They couldn't fathom that the free labor was about to end. You know how much money for 300, 400 years black folks made? Well, I say 400 years, but it must have been 244 years slavery existed. You know how much money we made for the white people?
Yeah, I think the South, when you look at the agriculture side, you're talking about the cotton industry.
Cotton was king.
Yeah, King Cotton, because even in Pine Bluff, where I'm from, they have a basketball tournament called the King Cotton Tournament.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of times, you know, the South was so powerful at that time. The southern states, in which ultimately came the Confederate, but when they wanted to break away, because of that, they were one of the richest areas in the entire world because of where the production of cotton, but it was the free labor.
Cotton was good, but it was when you can get it all produced for free, which what made it king. And the hard work. And I was looking at a documentary just 2 days ago, and in the Delta of Mississippi, cotton is still king. 80% of all the cotton made in Mississippi is done in the Delta, where cotton was king. And they mentioned cotton was king so many times because it truly was. And I have to say, I ended up picking some cotton. I didn't do it as long because I fought it. I fought my daddy. I broke him down to not let his last child be that. Don't, because I was going to be a problem for him. And I think he realized that. When I said, I want to go to school, this I don't want to do. And fortunate, the good Lord helped him to see it a 13-year-old son's way. You see, because back then, a 13-year-old didn't have much voice. Your opinion didn't matter. You got me? And he some kind of way. It was something that, but the setting, it was the setting, I think, set up everything, because sometimes you could have a good story, but the setting ain't right, and things can go haywire. In the situation, he was on the east side of the wagon, I was on the west side of the wagon. And in between, we had the inside of the wagon in between us, so we could have dialogue. One of the first few times he and I have ever had this kind of conversation, where we talking about different of opinion. And he's looking at me in the eye, and I'm looking at him in the eye, and I said, this is not what I want to do. He said, son, you don't know what you're talking about. In a loving voice. But I said, I do. I don't want to do it. I want to go to school. I want to do better than that. I don't want to work for free. And I was able to get my story across, or my point across. It wasn't a story, but getting my point across. And he said, go, son, go. If you're ever going to hear go, that sounds so good. Now I remember when I was coaching third base and my teams at Southern, I wanted a guy to go home, and I would say, go. That go meant go. That go was done with such vigor.
Yeah, they don't even understand.
They could never understand when they say go. So wanted to share that. I know we got to get to some other thing, but the Dr. King holiday birthday was something special, and it is something special.
And I just want to ask, because I love, because it's not often you get a chance, especially at my age, to be able to have the beauty of sitting down with someone who lived through that, because I think my generation has a hard time of putting in respect on that, because you guys had to crawl for us to walk. Well, somebody was crawling for you to walk, and then for you to walk for us to run.
Some people died for us to crawl or walk and talk. And let's go about that if we go a little further back, because there were a lot of people who died for this. And white people died too, who came from the north to help, because they saw it as being wrong. We need to also get history straight to let them know that it wasn't only just the black people, but there were some whites who came to help in the battle. You got me?
And I think so often we get the story told from very few perspectives of people that was typically dealing with civil rights directly. But it's the stories of being able to sit down with, when you with your grandparents, when you with your aunties and uncles and people and families that can directly tell you what it was like during my time of living through that era. And I think especially a large portion of, or a vast majority of my generation that's growing up, I don't think we quite put the respect on it that we should, to understand that the luxuries that we have today came at a price. And somebody had to pay that price. And so I'm always respectful, because I believe in understanding where I come from in order to know where I'm going. But I like to put respect, because I know from where I'm at today, it has been a long road travel, and it wasn't easy. And like you said, many lost their lives. I'm pretty sure growing up, your mom and dad probably never voted before, did they?
No.
You know?
No, they never voted. You know, because of segregation and the way that things were. The intimidation factor. Mm-hmm. You know, that could make people, we'll put you out your house. Just something as simple as that. Where do you go with a family if you get put out? You got me? Mm-hmm. So those kind of things, they always had something over your head that was designed to keep you in place. You got me?
I'm going to ask you this before we move on. This is the last thing. When we integrated, I take places like Baton Rouge and let's say Scotlandville area. Scotlandville in terms of the African-American community here in Baton Rouge, and just like many cities all over the South, had their areas of town that thrived off of African-American support in businesses. But when integration happened, we started to see those businesses dwell that were African-American owned, and people began to kind of want to be accepted. So we go on the other side of town and we spend money with the white businesses and the white side of town. And ultimately we saw, we had our own black bus lines. We had our own black grocery stores. We had our own black taxis. We had things, just businesses that were supported by us, for us. But it seemed as integration happened, we started to lose those businesses, those hotels, those restaurants, those clubs. And I think even when you look at an area just right up the road here in South Baton Rouge, you look at an area that was once thriving, you look at North Baton Rouge and the Scotlandville area, where we lost that support and we seem to abandon our communities to want to be somewhere else, a part of another community. Do you think that was detrimental that we ultimately abandoned our own and tried to be a part of something so much bigger to where the two worlds could have maybe intertwined and worked as we continue to, I guess, support and put our dollars into our communities as we did before?
Only way that could have worked if we would have been not being this thing separate but equal was a detriment, because people didn't want to. They knew they weren't equal once you were separated. If it could have existed that you keep your black-owned communities and everything was the same, you had the same school system, the same tax dollars being poured in to an upkeep of the community. And I think it would have been different, but once integration started, we saw the ripple effect from the very top to the bottom. It happened all across the board, all in every state in the country. And they saw it, and it's all over. Now, there are pockets of communities that were able to survive, very small pockets, because they always were going to be all black. And it's mainly in the big cities because you got a population. The numbers are there. You got me? Small town America can't exist that way. But you go into some cities like, I've gone into New York and into Harlem. I mean, Harlem always going to be majority black, but there are a lot of good things taking place in Harlem. Even though you hear bad things about Harlem. I heard bad things until I got in there and said, hey, this ain't bad. This is not bad here. And if you go with the right people, they take you to the right places, you really can enjoy them. So those are the kinds of things that are going to exist. In Chicago, you're going to have pockets of blacks. I mean, in Atlanta. I mean, Houston, Dallas. There are places you're going to have them.
Well, that's our segment of honoring the legacy and the life of Dr. Martin Luther King, and to be able to hear a perspective of what it was like doing segregation and integration, man, for me is always, I don't know, it touches me just to know that it wasn't that long ago, 50 years ago, and people try to make it seem like, wasn't that long ago at all. And, and to be able to hear that story firsthand. But what we're going to do is we're going to take a break and we're going to come back and we're going to complete and finish out the rest of Chopping It Up with Cador. So y'all stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right?
Looking to get some keys made, locks rekeyed, or a wide variety of new and used safe? Then look no further than the trusted choice of Alfred Safe and Lock. Conveniently located off of Government Street in Mid-City, Baton Rouge. Trust the expert locksmith at Alfred for all of your residential, commercial, and industrial lock and safe needs. Trusted by Baton Rouge and me, Roger Cador, to protect what is yours since 1946.
Take your fun full throttle with a single touch. There are places to fly high, swing low, or make the old bell ring. Your targets are in sight. Better your game by playing ball of almost every variety. Need to catch your breath? There's a place for that too. Countless ways to play beyond the swing sets. Breck, we're more than a playground.
It is time to trade in your isolation for celebration, to break out and get away. And at Baton Rouge Metro Airport, you'll get away a lot quicker. BTR is way closer, more convenient, with easy parking, check-in that's a breeze, and non-stops and short hops to anywhere you want to go. So get back to your life and be quick about it. Baton Rouge Metro Airport. It's about time. FlyBTR.com.
Have a passion? We've got the place. Gear up for where the rubber meets the mud, or stir up memories of a lifetime. Reach new heights. Gravitate towards something out of this world. Even travel back in time. You might like a little drama in your life, or get in touch with your inner nature lover. Release some pent-up energy while you're at it. There's plenty to do beyond the swing sets. Breck, we're more than a playground.
Hey, Coach Roger Cador here. There's something about teamwork that brings the best out in any business. When I need a tow, I call Roadrunner Towing. Roadrunner's 4 generations strong and homegrown right here in Baton Rouge.
Thanks, Coach. There's no job too large or too small. Call Roadrunner for quick, reliable, exceptional service. We don't want an arm and a leg, we just want your toes. And remember, take time each day to be a blessing to someone. Thank you.
Getting a letter from the IRS that you owe back taxes can be scary, but it doesn't have to be. Call Go Tax Resolution in Lafayette at 337-420-1040 today. We'll help stop garnishments, levies, and seizures immediately. With over 35 years of dealing directly with the IRS, our team of local professionals will help you pay the least amount possible. So if you owe back taxes to the IRS, you need help. Call the tax professionals at Go Tax Resolution in Lafayette at 337-420-1040. Your go-to tax relief.
It is time to trade in your isolation for celebration, to break out and get away. And at Baton Rouge Metro Airport, you'll get away a lot quicker. BTR is way closer, more convenient, with easy parking, check-in that's a breeze, and non-stops and short hops to anywhere you want to go. So get back to your life and be quick about it. Baton Rouge Metro Airport. It's about time. FlyBTR.com.
All right, we are back. More Chopping It Up with Cador. Hit that little subscribe button right there. You see it. I'm pointing right at it. It's right below the video. It says subscribe. You hit that, you get a ding and a notification every time we go live. I got one today when we went live. So if you do that, you'll get it as well. It says, hey, Chopping It Up with Coach Cador is now live. So be sure to subscribe. We'll love to have your support as well as share and put this out there for people to be able to hear, because it's not often you get a chance to be able to hear from a legend and the man of Coach Roger Cador. So that's why it ain't conversations with Cador. It's chopping it up. We chopping it up. All right. So it has a little bit different perspective. And we're going to jump right into it, because over this break, Coach, and I got to ask you.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I got to ask you, because this is what it's all about. Dealing with HBCUs, of course, you were there for 40 years, 40 years.
More than that, because as a coach, but when you start talking about as a student and other affiliation, you're talking about 50-some years.
So you have a long history of knowing what it's like to be at a HBCU from the student perspective, as well as from being in the coaching perspective in terms of a faculty member. But recently, Bethune-Cookman fired their head coach, Terry Sims, who had been there for about 4 years. Coach Sims helped transition Bethune-Cookman from the MEAC, the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference, and brought him into the SWAC, the Southwestern Athletic Conference. And Bethune-Cookman, before Terry Sims was named the head coach, he was on the staff as a positions coach, but they had Brian Jenkins, who had saw some success at Bethune-Cookman, had beat some Group of 5 schools, had Bethune-Cookman battling for first place each and every year in the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference in terms of football. But Bethune didn't quite seem to have that success as they transition into the SWAC. In the past 2 years, they've struggled. So they decided to move on from Coach Terry Sims, and we saw it on the ticker, the headliner. It was almost like a Deion Sanders hire. They brought in Ed Reed, Hall of Fame NFL player Ed Reed, right here from Louisiana. Of course, played many years for the Baltimore Ravens. He's been working on and off, I think, with the Miami Hurricanes down as a staff member with the athletics department. But it caught people out by surprise. It was like, okay, they seem to be following the Jackson State, model of, we're going to go hire a guy that's going to come in with the NFL experience. He's a Hall of Famer, and he seems to have network that comes with him in terms of the people that he knows. Now, Ed Reed has taken the job and made the ticker, and recently on social media, Ed Reed, or Coach Ed Reed, has made posts pretty much backlash going directly at the administration and Bethune-Cookman, saying Deion Sanders was right about HBCUs. They don't have their shit together. And as he said that, he was riding around on the cart, but his words were far harsher and far more worse than what I'm saying. But, he was just pointing out things, saying he's there, he's working. So far, they have not even completed his contract, that he's trying to get things done and people don't want to help. And he's out here, and you watched it and I showed it to you, but you saw his reaction. And for me, First of all, if you're in that position during the interview process, are there not things that you sit down with an administration and discuss to say, hey, what do we have? What do I start with? And this is where I want to go, first of all. Second of all, the facilities. If I'm in the interview process, do I not go tour and see what I'm working with? This should not be just all of a sudden a surprise. This is what you have. He even stated that the office, his coach's office, was not cleaned out. If I'm on an interview process, I want to see where will my office be. If I get there, hey, will we be able to take care of this? It's just understanding that these low resource institutions may not necessarily have it all together, but I believe this is why they hire someone like you, Ed Reed, to come in and to give a perspective differently from an outside world to say, what ways can we help change things with you, with the people that you know, with your networks? And for him to go on social media and just openly blast them, and you heard his words. They were not choice words. He was just going off the dome, as we call it.
I wish you would stop talking. You're killing it. You're killing it. You're saying too much because we already, and most people who are going to listen to us probably have seen the social media posts. I've had a problem with Ed Reed to start with. It wasn't the first time. His name came up with something a couple of years ago, and I said I would never hire that guy.
And people also brought his name up for the Southern job.
Yeah, I said never, stay away from that guy. How could you go and accept a job and you never look at the facility or your office or anything? How could you do that? What? It doesn't make sense to me. I really see, because we didn't see that on the post, his office, I just can't believe he didn't go and say, let me see my facilities. I think that's one of the things you always do. Would you agree?
I would agree.
But for this guy to do that, he could be fired without cause. Or with cause or whatever. They could fire him and not let that guy come and coach there. I see it a problem. You know, the vulgarity that he's using now, he's going to use it among the young players, the student athletes. I don't see that stopping. Everybody's not fit to be a coach at this level. I don't care if he's a Hall of Famer. And now you're going to get on me about this. The guy don't look right. You know, he's got to clean up his act. Why would you hire someone? You got to go into the parents, into homes looking like that. What person in their mind is going to want to send their kid to that guy?
And I looked at it more so when you go on social media and you bash where you at,
yes,
you should be the solution, not the problem. What coaches and what student athletes are want to, and this is your job to build the program now.
That's right.
But if you're going to tear it down, who's going to want to come to somewhere where you're tearing down and talking about it that way in such arrogance?
I know he retracted some in that stuff, even though we didn't hear it. Did you hear it? He did a retraction.
Well, what he did was he made a post that basically said he apologized about what he said.
Right.
And I said somebody must have got into his ears.
They had to. Ain't nobody must have. They had to. Somebody had to say, man, you can't do this. See, this ghetto mentality, you can't do that. This is a private school with a rich tradition for education. Why? And you got to be careful who you hire. I often said that. You know, Deion Sanders was smart. Okay? He understood what he could do and what he couldn't do. The things he talked about at Jackson State, he could get away with that. And when I say get away, it wasn't like, you know, there were some things Jackson needed to be called out on. But the thing is, not only did he went and fixed them. What is Mr. Ed Reed going to do? Mr. Ed Reed, you know they don't have the finance. Somebody didn't tell you that when you took that job, that this was a low-resource institution? Now, I'm not making excuses for the ground stuff not being clean. Never going to make excuse for that. Never going to make any excuse for that. I saw to blame the administration for bringing in someone, and you knowing he's coming from Miami, you have to clean that up. And it ain't that difficult, to be honest with you. It could be done, and it's just a poor situation. It's the reason why you got to be careful with who you hire, because they could end up doing more harm than good. You know, what is Ed Reed going to win? I don't know. He may be the greatest coach since sliced bread, but I don't like his attitude. And that's just my opinion.
And I asked that dude because when you took over Southern, there were no resources for
Nothing.
you. And you had to come in, and I think about what is Roger Cador like if he's the head coach in the age of social media. And I just can't help. I don't think you would probably go to that extent and go off, but you know, you came in and you saw, well, we didn't have this, we didn't have that. And instead of me bashing, I looked for a solution. The same thing I think with Coach Sanders being at Jackson.
Yeah.
Although a lot of people didn't like his approach, but what I did admire from him in that action was what he did was he got on there, instead of saying, why the hell this and why the hell that, he said, you know what? My players need to see a dentist. Anybody in the Jackson area that has a dentist office, reach out to me. My players need haircuts. Anybody out there that's a barber, reach out. He did a call to action.
Yes.
He knew what we didn't have, what they didn't have, and he
Right.
understood the situation. Now, there were some other things from the administrative side that he thought people who do get paid, there are some things that you could be doing differently. But you know what? Because you won't, don't worry about it. I do it. And I think over time that gets old to somebody where you're more than the football coach, which I know you were more than the baseball coach, but you had a drive and a will to do that. These guys coming from their position may not have that drive and will. They just want to come in and focus on the game, to coach the football and move on. And I think for Deion, that was ultimately what pushed him out of Jackson to Colorado, where, all right, I can get to Colorado where people will be able to, I can just say, hey, we need this, and somebody will go work on that instead of me having to be the coach and seeming like the athletic director, and I got to go out to be the business guy as well. But for Coach Reed in this situation, and I have to respect you a lot, and that's why I asked someone like you got the Southern, didn't have the resources. It wasn't even limited. There were no resources. But yet you went out there and created that. So as a guy being in that position and seeing Coach Reed, what would be your message if Coach Reed was to hear this, to hear from a legend, a 14-time SWAC champion, 13-time SWAC Coach of the Year, and done things on the HBCU level that no one had ever done, and found success somewhere where they didn't have it, and now he's going somewhere in a situation at a HBCU with those limited resources? What would Coach Roger Cador say to a Coach Ed Reed?
Well, I would, if he would listen, because I don't know what kind of guy he is, I would say, Ed, you knew coming here that, Ed, you hadn't been living under a rock. You knew they didn't have the resources. You understood the limitation. Now, what about the cleanliness? I agree with you on the cleanliness issue. That doesn't cost a lot of resource to clean and have your office really nice and prepared, you know? It's not the size of the hall, it's the cleanliness. If it's neat, well organized, people can overlook it. But if you got some dirt, then it's a little more difficult. The other thing is, I would say, don't talk about the people you got to work with. They're going to see, at some point, Ed, if things don't go right, they got that hammer over your head. And they're going to drop it, and they're going to drop it hard. You're going to need to find a way to work with the administration, or not work with them, but don't badge them. You can't make your boss feel small. You can't do that. And don't do it to the institution. You're going to hurt, you're going to make the people who might want to give not give. You got me? Don't talk negative about them. And that's the thing that I did. Now, did I talk negative about Southern? Yes, I did, but never to the media where they're going to go print it. You know, I talked negative about Southern, but I talked to in private conversation where everybody can't hear what we're saying. You got me? Because there were things they could have done and didn't do. And I just wanted people to know about it. But I never went on social media to the media and said, I just said we had to get it done the best way we knew how. And we always found a way. Always. If you try, preparation meets opportunity.
Against all odds.
There you go.
Let's get ready to take a break. I hope Coach Reed, you're out there listening. Wise words from a wise man. He'll tell you. He did it for 40 years. Listen. All right? Stay tuned. We'll be right back. More Chopping It Up with Coach Cador.
Looking to get some keys made, locks rekeyed, or a wide variety of new and used safe? Then look no further than the trusted choice of Alfred Safe and Lock. Conveniently located off of Government Street in Mid-City, Baton Rouge. Trust the expert locksmith at Alfred for all of your residential, commercial, and industrial lock and safe needs. Trusted by Baton Rouge and me, Roger Cador, to protect what is yours since 1946.
Take your fun full throttle with a single touch. There are places to fly high, swing low, or make the old bell ring. Your targets are in sight. Better your game by playing ball of almost every variety. Need to catch your breath? There's a place for that too. Countless ways to play beyond the swing sets. Breck, we're more than a playground.
It is time to trade in your isolation for celebration, to break out and get away. And at Baton Rouge Metro Airport, you'll get away a lot quicker. BTR is way closer, more convenient, with easy parking, check-in that's a breeze, and non-stops and short hops to anywhere you want to go. So get back to your life and be quick about it. Baton Rouge Metro Airport. It's about time. FlyBTR.com.
Have a passion? We've got the place. Gear up for where the rubber meets the mud, or stir up memories of a lifetime. Reach new heights. Gravitate towards something out of this world. Even travel back in time. You might like a little drama in your life, or get in touch with your inner nature lover. Release some pent-up energy while you're at it. There's plenty to do beyond the swing sets. Breck, we're more than a playground.
Hey, Coach Roger Cador here. There's something about teamwork that brings the best out in any business. When I need a tow, I call Roadrunner Towing. Roadrunner's 4 generations strong and homegrown right here in Baton Rouge.
Thanks, Coach. There's no job too large or too small. Call Roadrunner for quick, reliable, exceptional service. We don't want an arm and a leg. We just want your toes. And remember, take time each day to be a blessing to someone. Thank you.
Getting a letter from the IRS that you owe back taxes can be scary, but it doesn't have to be. Call Go Tax Resolution in Lafayette at 337-420-1040 today. We'll help stop garnishments, levies, and seizures immediately. With over 35 years of dealing directly with the IRS, our team of local professionals will help you pay the least amount possible. So if you owe back taxes to the IRS, you need help. Call the tax professionals at Go Tax Resolution in Lafayette at 337-420-1040. Your go-to tax relief.
It is time to trade in your isolation for celebration, to break out and get away. And at Baton Rouge Metro Airport, you'll get away a lot quicker. BTR is way closer, more convenient, with easy parking, check-in that's a breeze, and non-stops and short hops to anywhere you want to go. So get back to your life and be quick about it. Baton Rouge Metro Airport. It's about time. FlyBTR.com.
All right, we're back with more Chopping It Up with Cador. I'm Perry White. He's Roger Cador. And of course, hit that subscribe button right there below this video. Get that notification. Interact with us in the comment section. You got a question for Coach Cador? I'm looking at it right here. Hey, I'll be able to see what you guys are asking. And baby, keep up. Someone already said this is a great history lesson in terms of what you were talking about when we were discussing the MLK, and you talking about your history of where you grew up. So somebody they thought well of that, and that was me too. I thought it was an excellent history lesson. So
Okay, thank you
for that. But still, you got a question? Jump in here with us, man.
So my question was, why is it that when going back to the Ed Reed situation, why is it when I guess I could say this, us as black people, when we go into something like trying to help our own people in terms of what Ed Reed is doing, it's like we don't get the same support as like a Dion going to Colorado and they giving him all access, as much money as you want, whatever you want to change, you change it, like that. And Dion, I mean, you see it, he in Colorado, they got new gear, new this, they got number one players showing up every other week, and Ed Reed go to Bethune-Cookman and he can't even get his office clean. So it's just
Let me just say this. If you were listening to when we were talking about MLK, for 244 years we worked for free.
True.
And when we got freedom, it's written in the Constitution we were supposed to get 40 acres and a mule. They didn't give it to us, even though it's written in there. And if you listen, that people in the South just started making money in the 60s. There's a lot of reason why Ed Reed don't have nothing. And the people we work and made all that money for are in Colorado. That's the reason they're able to do for Dion, because that's where the money is. It's not in the black institution. We're just on life support system to a large extent. And we don't have the funding now. Cookman is a private institution, but the state institutions just are not funded in the proper way that they could make it. You got me?
Right.
So that's the problem why you're going to keep losing people like Dion from a Jackson State, where Jackson State could have done better to keep him. But you had to be a business person and think forward thinking, and say, here's a man that brought in $185 million since he's been here. I can find $15 million and stick in this program, and we're going to be okay. That's the way I would have been thinking, because he's going to make more for us. I would have found ways to keep him happy. You got me? But you have to be forward thinking and not run the institution with your most profitable program, football. Mm-hmm. Run it like a mom and pop operation. And that's what they did. Mm-hmm. Don't make me start. I'm angry about it.
Well, and another question I had was, it's like a bunch of HBCUs have alumni like schools like LSU or whatever Power 5 institution you want to name. They have the alumni base that they've been successful in life and made some of that money that we talk about, the 40 acres and a mule, and they got that. But they don't give it back to the school or the university or the football program to bring it up and bring the university up in return too.
Yeah, they have some, but we don't have enough. We just don't have the numbers. I got to protect them to a small degree to make you understand. Not a lot of them do give back because they're concerned if the money is going to go where it should go. You know, if you read the article where Brett Favre told Coach Prime, that he knew the governor of Mississippi and he was going to get the governor to give the program some money. He talked to the governor put more money in it, gave it to Jackson State. And Jackson State admitted that they received the money, but didn't put it in the football program. What are you going to do?
Yeah, there's nothing you can do.
You got to understand, a lot of those presidents who run these institutions are afraid. They are afraid to turn football or loose, coaches with football or loose, where they can generate more money. To make money, you have to spend money. It's a known fact. You know, you're going to have to spend money to make money. And so the days of the way the Eddie Robinson did things and was able to keep the program afloat, getting the play, them days are over. You're going to have to Torrance Jackson State had a really good situation.
Yeah,
they really were. They had the goose that laid the golden egg. But he laid 2, not just 1. He had 2 golden eggs. And we just messed that up.
And I think also a perspective, especially from what you're asking, why doesn't it seem like the HBCUs could do the same thing like a Southern, then you compare it to, let's just break it down to even closer, like a UL, maybe not a LSU. Recently, there was a article that came out, and it talked about the underfunding of HBCUs across the nation. Southern alone, by the state of Louisiana, since its inception, has been underfunded by billions of dollars. This is money that they have not given to the institution that they have given to the white institutions in order to keep the facilities, to pay the faculty, put into research, in which for the HBCUs, they did not see them as a value. And it goes back to when I said to ex-coach Cador about his mom and dad being able to vote and they were not able to vote. So you think about, there have been a large portion of white people that have been able to vote since this country has been started. So they've been able to vote for their best interest in terms of their community. African Americans, you talk about the voting, we're just talking 50 years.
Yes.
50 years may seem like a long time, but when you're trying to get things done, it is a short time, because the world that we live in today was planned 10, 20 years ago. The world that we're going to live in 20 years is being planned now. So the people that are voting for what's happening now, we'll see that in the future. Our kids will be living in what's happening now. And I think what we're seeing and what we saw, and also, let's take a place like Southern University. Southern University, when you look at the African-American population in Louisiana, Southern University birthed the black middle class in Louisiana. It was one of the few places besides Grambling where you had a large population of African-Americans to be able to go get an education. And when you got that education, unfortunately for a lot of the people who got it, they had to leave Louisiana if they wanted opportunity. You may have gotten an education here, but the job market here was not going to be conducive to what you needed to make money, because it was still geared towards the white population, the white society. And so if you wanted to get that job, a lot of people had to move to a Houston, had to move to Atlanta, where you had what you said earlier, those black pockets, those pockets of black people in those communities where they were able to be successful and find those jobs where the job really didn't care about your color, but it was about your performance. A place like Louisiana still looks, although they have the jobs, it's still based largely off of what you look like. On top of, we're not graduating large numbers like LSU, who in 1 year can graduate probably 15 to 20,000 students. Southern in 1 year may graduate a couple thousand.
Yes.
You know, so you think about the workforce that you're pushing out there. On top of, there's still going to be a small pocket of people who are going to be able to make it, because when you look at the African American community as a whole, you're starting to see us with a trajectory going up. While white people have always had that trajectory. The 60s and the 50s and the 40s was a great time to be white. Life was different. That was a great time to be white, right?
You didn't have to share much. It was all yours.
It was all yours, and America was open for it to be yours. Think about Ellis Island when the immigrants came over into New York, the Italians and all of these people. They brought them in and gave them setups for them to move ahead and have a life and to be able to start society for their communities, to give them a leg up. Well, we still waiting on what?
40 acres and a mule. That's what I was talking about. They gave the Irishmen, the Italians, and all of those people from Germany, even though we were at war with them, we still gave them land in the West and the Midwest. We gave them land. We set up, they set up universities where they can teach them, and they made things accessible for them. They did it all right. But because they wouldn't do the African Americans right, you know, we were still stuck mainly in the South. And I like the fact that you brought up the number. LSU may graduate 10 to 15,000, where Southern may do 1,500 at best. It's a numbers game. Mm-hmm. And people have to understand that. It's a numbers game. And what do I mean by when I say numbers game? When people are advertising or trying to get their product out there, they always want to do it with the numbers. Mm-hmm. The more people see it, the more opportunity they will latch on to what they are trying to sell. And we just don't have the numbers. Mm-hmm. we've got to operate within the premise that we understand how the system works. Boy, you brought up a good point. That the thing people are voting on today is going to be something that is going to affect the population 20 years, 30 years from now. That's really when it's going to be in effect. You know, it's sort of like some of that money that President Biden putting out there. Some of that money is going to be 10 years being pushed out, where people will be able to take advantage. There'll be some people on the front end, but the back end is where everything is on the back end to a large extent. You got me?
It does. It matters what you do now for the future. It's the same way when you raise a child. It's what you instill into them as a youngster is what they're going to probably be as an adult. Those are the long-lasting things. Because as a youngster, you don't understand.
Right.
But when you get older, you say, you know what? My dad, my mom, what they said, it makes sense now. I get it. And that's the same way. That's why it's so important to understand why people say there's not a reason to vote. Oh, we're not. Why? Because what you're doing now is allowing somebody to write what the future is going to look like for you and your kids. So if you don't get involved now, and that's the same way I think, Stewie, to go back to answer your question about the HBCUs, Colorado has been placed in a position to be successful. And that place that they had has been going on for 100+ years in terms of the support that they give and the jobs that their alums are able to go out because society catered to that white population far beyond and before black people were able to even get to the table. Not sit at just to even get to we had to serve the table while all along they've been sitting at the table. And now we're starting to get a sprinkle of us that's actually able to sit at the table. But it's a process. They have always been able to be at the table. So everything in terms of their success has always been there for them. There's a reason why HBCUs, particularly like Southern and many others, are billions of dollars underfunded. Put that in perspective. What $1 billion would do for Southern University?
I mean, they would probably take Southern to the next level.
Exactly, but they cannot go to the state capitol and lobby. And Bobby Jindal tried to shut Southern down.
Yeah.
He tried to force Southern Southern is the only HBCU system. Think about that. Not only is it HBCU, but it's the only system in the world, not just in the world, where it is catered towards African Americans, but we got a ton of HBCUs that fall under somebody else's system. Take Prairie View. They fall under they fall under Texas A&M system. So although Prairie View is a HBCU, like he said, the president is scared because guess what? He still has to follow, or she still has to follow the guidelines of somebody that's over the system, not necessarily over the institution. And so when a place like Southern goes and lobby to the state capitol, and you got a Republican ran Senate because our people aren't voting in order to make the change to get the people in there that's for us that'll make the decision. When you got let's just use Republicans who are more conservative that in the South that we know may not see a value in terms of an institution that's catered towards African Americans. What are you going to do when you get your funding cut from $150 million down to $50 million because they don't see why are we spending $100 million with that institution? All of those things play an effect on top of the job market of our alums, being able to go out and get those high-paying jobs. I know we live in a world in which we got social media and a lot of people able to stunt and create a lifestyle to show like I'm living large, but in actuality, there are not a lot of African Americans making six figures in this country.
There you go.
It is a small number, and for a lot of us, we're living outside of our means. And for a lot of us, what we have failed to understand and what I think we do need to do a better job at our HBCUs in terms of the customer service experience. So when you leave, it's a place you always going to look at as home and you want to give back to it because I care about it. So it's about how I treated you when you were there.
Right.
And second of all, we got to be able to teach our community what it's like to give back, because not only at HBCUs, but just look at our communities as a whole, period. Two things I always say black people don't do a good job at, that's at the bottom of our totem pole. That is politics and that is education. We don't like to show up to vote in large numbers. And we won't show up in terms to figure out who's running our schools, our school boards, who's our superintendent, holding, because education is key when you got to unlock the mind of a young person who's going to be your future. Politics is key because it's going to take the money to go into the education to help unlock that mind of a young person that's ultimately going to be our future. And so we got to do a better job to intertwine that, but it starts to be able to teach that, to have an understanding there is a value in those two. And if we can get better at those, but remember, it's only been about 50 years. It's going to take some time. White America didn't grow in 50 years. It took time, but it was also a lot of free labor that was behind it.
244 years of it.
So there was a lot of profit without any overhead, right? So, that's a big leg up. Yeah. Huge. Imagine you worked for 50 years for somebody and you never got paid, but that person, because of your labor, was able to go on vacations, able to do all of these things while you struggled to feed your family, and they was the ones that able to get the fruits of your labor. That's what has happened in this country. And so HBCUs are a direct reflection of the low resource institutions. If it's not only because our alums having a hard time to go find these jobs in these markets, let alone the state not supporting the education side in terms of finding the value of what we look like, and I think that's the biggest portion of that.
You did a wonderful job of breaking it down.
Look, you just gave me all the answers I needed.
Yeah, he did. And it's so wonderful to see a young man like you who understands the total scope of what is taking place at HBCUs. Is funding. I mean, Southern used to have I think it was about $150 million. Now it's down to 50. I know at one point it was at 60. Can you imagine that kind of hit? I mean, that's a hit. Now LSU lost funding too through gender. I mean,
but because they have a base of alums that have always had a leg up in society, they have a base that's willing to give back on top of the athletics perspective. Because I believe athletics at LSU gave money to help fund the institution during that hardship. But all of that matters. And
it matters. It's just a wonderful thing that we can give that information to people to try and educate them. Don't look down on HBCUs. They just haven't had the opportunity to operate equally.
And there's a timeline.
Yeah.
We got to allow this timeline because in our head, it seems like it's been a long time, but it hasn't when you're talking about the resources. It hasn't when you talk about the alum support and getting an understanding of why these things matter. We're still living in the process of it unfolding. And I think that's the part where we look at it, where we feel like it should be a finished product because we live in an instant gratification society today.
But Perry, also, it's going to take educating people the art of giving. Mm-hmm. It's going to be it's about the art of giving back, and we're going to have to educate them. It's not going to happen overnight, but we got to treat them better. We got to make them feel good about giving. And I think
because black folks don't have a problem giving to church.
No,
we'll we'll go to church. We'll make a church a $1 billion industry, won't we?
Yeah.
But when it comes to our education, do we value religion more than education?
And we got to make them see that preacher ain't getting them nowhere. They thought they going. That preacher's not going to get. I hate to say that, but he's not going to get them where he's making them believe. They're lining his pocket up and he living in fancy homes and driving fancy cars. So that shouldn't be. He should be like you and I, driving regular cars, hardworking.
And being a humanitarian for the people that
in his community. He shouldn't be paid for his service. If he want to follow an example, Jesus wasn't paid. I think that's the greatest example. And he did great work. He did it for free. So why should we pay a guy? I know a lot of people want to go into church and be a part of something. They say, I'll get paid. I think it's so low down to do that. Living on the poor people, Yeah.
Well, that's the end of another show today, man. I like this.
The end?
Yeah, we here.
There?
We there.
Damn.
It was good, wasn't it?
It was good.
I love it, man, and I thank everybody for your support. I hope you enjoyed it as well, and if you're tuning in after the fact, I hope you do enjoy this by the time you get to this point, because this is what it's about when he's talking about chopping it up with Cador. This is a history lesson, and this is a life lesson at the same time, getting an understanding of what things are and why they are the way that they are. So, as always, we want to thank you guys for supporting and for watching. Be able to hit that subscribe button right there and subscribe. We'll be back next week. And guess what? I'm Perry White. Hey, shout my man out right here. Coach, you got to shout out, produce out. Come on, Stewie, shout him out.
Come on, you got to let me have it. You got to let me go home, man.
And we out of here. There you go.